The rainforest was alive with sound. Birds called to each other from high branches and insects buzzed in the thick air. The leaves dripped with water after the morning rain and the soil smelled rich and old. Deep inside this world of green, a young man named Emil walked with a notebook in his hand. His boots pressed into the soft ground as he pushed aside hanging vines and searched the stones around him. Emil was not like other men in his village. He was curious about things that most people called forgotten. While others worked in fields or hunted in the forest, Emil spent his time reading old records in the library of the nearby town. He had studied the drawings on stones left by the ancient Mayan people. His heart always returned to one legend, the tale of the Jaguar King. The story said the Jaguar King was not only a ruler, but also a guardian of wisdom. He sat upon a golden throne shaped with the head of a jaguar, a throne that was said to carry power from the sky. Elders in the village told children not to seek this throne, for it was guarded by mysteries too strong for ordinary men. Still, the legend grew inside Emil like a flame. He could not ignore it. One evening, while searching through broken tablets in a small-town museum, Emil found a piece of writing that made his hands tremble. It spoke of a temple far inside the jungle, hidden by rivers and cliffs where the Jaguar King's throne still rested. The words were old, carved in glyphs, but Emil had learned how to read them with patience. The moment he understood the meaning, he felt as if the throne itself was calling his name. His friends in the village warned him not to go. "The jungle eats those who are foolish," an elder told him. "Even strong men are lost in its shadow. Do not chase after ghosts." Emil only bowed his head in respect, but inside he had already decided. He would go. He would find the throne and learn the truth. The next morning, Emil packed his small bag. He took water, dried food, rope, and his notebook. He also carried a small carving of a jaguar given to him by his grandmother. She had whispered that it would guide him when the path was unclear. With these things, Emil set off toward the jungle's edge. As he walked, the sun filtered through the trees, making patterns on the ground. He heard the calls of howler monkeys and the rustle of hidden creatures. The deeper he went, the more the world of men faded away. Houses and roads were behind him now. Only the forest remained, thick and endless. Hours passed before he stopped to rest beside a wide tree with roots like walls. He took a drink of water and studied the old notes he had copied. The glyphs described a place where the sun touched the earth in a straight line during certain months. There behind a waterfall, the temple of the Jaguar King was hidden. Emil closed his notebook and looked around. He could hear the rush of water not far away. His heart beat faster. By the time he reached the river, the day was growing late. Mist rose from the waterfall ahead, white and glowing in the golden light of the sun. The roar of the falling water filled his ears. Emil stood at the edge of the river and stared at the curtain of water. Could the temple truly be there behind the spray? He stepped closer, feeling the cold mist on his face. He looked down at the small carving in his hand. The jaguar's eyes seemed alive in the fading light. "Show me the way," he whispered. With a deep breath, he tied his rope to a tree and prepared to climb the slippery rocks that led behind the waterfall. Every step was hard. The stones were wet and sharp, and the water pushed against him like a heavy hand. Still he climbed, gripping the rope with strength. At last he pulled himself into a small hollow space behind the falls. The air was cool and filled with spray. His eyes slowly adjusted to the dim light, and he gasped. Before him stood a wall of stone covered in carvings. Jaguars, stars, and kings were etched into the surface. Moss grew between the lines, but the shapes were clear. This was no ordinary rock. It was the doorway to something ancient. Emil placed his hand upon the stone, and for a moment he thought he felt a faint warmth. The carving seemed to shimmer under his touch. He stepped back, his breath quick. The throne was real. The temple was real, and now he was standing at its secret entrance. The sound of the waterfall roared behind him, but inside Emil felt only silence. He knew his journey had just begun. Somewhere beyond this stone wall, deep in the hidden chambers of the earth, the golden throne of the Jaguar King waited. Emil returned to his village that night with his clothes still damp from the waterfall. He sat beside a small fire and thought about the stone wall he had touched. The carvings had spoken to him without words. He knew he could not face the path ahead alone. The jungle was wide and dangerous, and the temple was not a place for a single man to explore. He needed companions, people he could trust. The next day, Emil visited the town at the edge of the jungle. There he met Nira, a young archaeologist who had studied the Mayan world for many years. She was known for her patience and for her careful hands when working with old stone. Emil shared his discovery with her, showing the copied glyphs and describing the wall hidden behind the waterfall. Nira listened with wide eyes. Many have searched for this place, she said softly, but no one has found proof. If what you say is true, then the Jaguar King's throne may still exist. Emil nodded. I cannot reach it alone. Will you come with me? Nira hesitated. She had heard stories of men vanishing in the forest, lost to rivers and storms, but her heart was filled with the same hunger for truth that lived inside Emil. At last she smiled. Yes, if the throne is real, we must see it. The two then sought a guide who knew the forest well. In the village near the river lived Tolan, a quiet man with sharp eyes. He moved through the jungle as if it were part of him. When Emil and Nira told him of the throne, Tolan frowned. My father spoke of the Jaguar King, Tolan said. He told me the throne is not for men to find. It belongs to the gods of the sky, Emil answered with respect. I do not wish to steal it or to use it for greed. I only wish to learn and to honor what was left behind. Tolan studied him for a long moment. At last he nodded. Then I will guide you. But remember this, the forest tests all who enter. If your heart is not strong, it will turn against you. With their small group formed, they prepared for the journey. They packed food, tools, ropes, and lights. Nira carried her notebooks and brushes, while Tolan carried a machete and medicines from the forest. Emil carried his grandmother's jaguar carving, which he kept close to his heart. The morning of their departure was quiet. Mist clung to the trees as they set out, their footsteps soft on the damp earth. Birds flew above them in flashes of color. The forest smelled of wet leaves and flowers. Though the air was heavy, there was beauty everywhere. Days passed as they walked deeper into the wild. At times the river guided their path, flowing strong and clear. Other times they cut through thick walls of vines and roots. Nira paused often to study carvings on fallen stones, marking signs of the ancient world. Tolan kept watch for danger, pointing out snakes hidden in branches and listening to the calls of distant animals. At night they sat around small fires, sharing food and stories. Tolan told them what his elders had passed down, that the Jaguar King was not only a ruler but also a friend to the Skywalkers. These beings, he said, came from beyond the stars. They gave wisdom to the king and promised him a throne that held their power. But when the king grew old, he refused their offer to leave with them. He chose to stay with his people until the end of his days. Nira leaned forward. If this is true, then the throne is more than a seat. It could be a vessel of knowledge. Emil listened quietly, the firelight glowing in his eyes. He felt the truth in Tolan's words. The thought of the Skywalkers filled him with wonder. Perhaps humanity was never alone. Perhaps the Jaguar King had seen things no one else had ever seen. One afternoon, as they crossed a wide plain covered in tall grass, a storm gathered quickly. Dark clouds rolled above and rain began to fall in heavy drops. Lightning split the sky and thunder shook the ground. The group hurried to find shelter beneath large rocks. For hours they waited as rain poured down, soaking the land. When the storm finally passed, they emerged to find the plain shining under the sun. Water pooled in the grass like silver mirrors. Emil stood in the open, breathing deeply. The storm had tested them, but they were still moving forward. He felt it was a sign. On the fourth day, they reached a place where the river split into two. Tolan studied the flow of water carefully. The left path leads to the cliffs, he said. If the throne is hidden behind a waterfall, this may be the way. Emil felt his heart rise. He looked at Nira and Tolan. Then the true journey begins here. The group stepped into the river's edge, following the path of water that would lead them deeper into the unknown. Ahead lay the temple of the Jaguar King, still waiting after countless years. The forest seemed to whisper around them as if aware of their steps. Emil tightened his grip on the jaguar carving. The throne was close. He could feel it. The river carried them deeper into the jungle. The sound of rushing water grew louder as the days passed. Trees leaned over the banks, their roots twisting into the current like giant claws. Bright birds flashed across the sky, and sometimes they saw shadows of animals drinking from the river's edge. Emil, Nira, and Tolan moved carefully. They paddled small wooden rafts that Tolan had built from fallen logs and vines. The current was strong, but Tolan knew how to guide them. He watched the water closely, his sharp eyes searching for hidden rocks. Nira wrote notes in her book, sketching the strange symbols carved into stones they passed on the shore. Emil kept his eyes forward, feeling the pull of something greater waiting ahead. One evening, the sun dipped low, painting the river gold. They heard the roar of a waterfall before they saw it. Mist rose into the air like smoke glowing in the light. Behind the curtain of water, the cliff face shone dark and wet. Emil felt his chest tighten. He remembered the stone wall he had touched before. This was the place the glyphs had spoken of. They tied the rafts to strong roots and climbed the slippery rocks. Water sprayed their faces and the roar of the falls filled their ears. At last they reached the hollow space behind the curtain of water. Emil's heart pounded as he stepped inside. The chamber was dark at first, but slowly their eyes adjusted. The walls were smooth and covered with carvings of jaguars, stars, and strange shapes that looked like both animals and people. The air was cool and damp. Every sound they made echoed as if the walls were alive. Nira touched one of the carvings with gentle fingers. These glyphs are older than anything I have seen. They speak of a king who walked with the skywalkers. Look here. This line says he was lifted above the earth. Emil stepped closer, tracing the shapes with his eyes. Lifted above the earth. Could it mean he traveled with them? Could it mean he saw their world? Tolan stood quietly, his hand on the hilt of his machete. His eyes searched the shadows. This place has power. We must be careful. Not all doors are meant to be opened. They pressed deeper into the chamber. The echoes followed them, strange and sharp as if voices were hidden in the stone. Once Emil thought he heard his name whispered, though neither Nira nor Tolan had spoken. He shook his head and walked on, though his skin prickled. At the end of the passage they found a vast hall. The ceiling arched high above them, covered in glittering crystals that caught the dim light. In the center stood a massive doorway carved with the head of a jaguar. Its eyes were made of dark stone that seemed to glow faintly. Nira's breath caught. This must be the entrance to the inner temple. The Jaguar King himself would have passed through here. Emil stepped forward and placed his hand on the jaguar's stone face. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the crystals above began to shimmer, and the ground beneath them trembled. Slowly, the doorway opened, stone grinding against stone. A cold wind rushed out, carrying with it the smell of earth and age. The three entered carefully. The inner chamber was vast, filled with tall pillars carved into shapes of jaguars, serpents, and stars. The walls shone with faded colors, blue and gold still clinging after centuries. Every step echoed loud and long. Emil walked ahead, his eyes fixed on a raised platform at the far end. Though the light was dim, he could see the outline of something large at its center. His heart raced, but before they could reach it, the chamber began to hum. A low sound filled the air, not made by wind or water. It came from the very walls themselves. The carvings glowed faintly, lines of light running along them like rivers of fire. Nira gasped. The temple is alive. It knows we are here. The sound grew louder, and then visions flashed before them. They saw images on the walls as if painted by light. A great king sitting on a throne of gold, a jaguar at his side. Above him, shapes of beings not quite human, tall and shining with eyes like stars. The people of the city bowed to them while the king raised his hand in peace. Emil stood frozen. It is true. The Jaguar King walked with the Skywalkers. This throne is not only legend. Tolan stepped back, uneasy. These are not visions for men to see. They are warnings. The throne carries power that may not belong to us. But Emil could not turn away. The throne was close, and the temple itself seemed to guide him toward it. The humming softened as he took a step forward, as if welcoming him. Nira held her breath. If the throne is still here, then we may be standing in the heart of the legend. The three of them walked slowly across the hall, their footsteps echoing under the glowing pillars. The air grew heavy with silence, broken only by the faint hum of the temple. At last they reached the steps leading to the raised platform. Emil climbed the first step, his hand clutching the jaguar carving close to his chest. He looked back at Nira and Tolan, their faces lit by the strange glow. Then he turned forward, ready to see what waited at the top. The Temple of Echoes had led them here. And beyond this platform, hidden in the heart of stone, the golden throne of the Jaguar King waited to be revealed. The steps rose slowly toward the platform, each one wide and worn smooth with age. Emil placed his feet carefully, his heart racing faster with every step. Nira followed close behind, her eyes shining with both fear and wonder. Tolan walked last, his hand never leaving the hilt of his blade, though he knew no weapon could defend against the power in this place. At the top of the platform, the air felt different. It was colder yet heavy, as if carrying a weight that pressed down on their shoulders. In the center of the platform stood the throne itself. It was made of pure gold, yet not dull or aged. It shone as though it had just been crafted, its surface glowing with a soft light. The back of the throne was carved into the head of a jaguar, its open mouth showing sharp teeth, its eyes set with deep black stones that seemed to stare at them. Every line of the throne was filled with detail, as if it had been made by hands far beyond the skill of ordinary men. Emil's breath caught in his throat. For years he had dreamed of this moment, but to see it with his own eyes felt unreal. He stepped forward slowly, as if afraid the throne might vanish if he moved too fast. Nira whispered, "It looks untouched by time. No dust, no cracks. How can this be?" Tolan frowned. "It is not the work of human hands alone. The Skywalkers gave this throne. It was made to last forever." Emil reached out his hand, trembling. But before he could touch the shining gold, the floor beneath them shook. The entire chamber seemed to breathe, stone grinding against stone. The entrance they had walked through closed with a heavy crash. Darkness pressed in as the light from outside vanished. Nira gasped. "We are trapped." The pillars lit up again, glowing brighter than before. Strange patterns of light ran along the walls, and the throne itself began to hum. It was a low sound, almost like the growl of a jaguar, deep and steady. Emil dropped his hand and stepped back, his heart pounding. Then, before their eyes, images appeared above the throne. They were not carvings, but moving visions, as clear as if they were looking through a window into the past. They saw a grand city, alive with people wearing bright feathers and gold. At its heart sat the Jaguar king, strong and proud, upon the golden throne. Around him stood shining figures, tall and slender, their skin glowing faintly as if lit from within. The people bowed before them, not in fear but in respect. Nira whispered, "These must be the Skywalkers." The vision shifted. The Jaguar king grew older, his face lined with years, yet still strong in spirit. The Skywalkers stood before him, offering their hands. A great light opened above them, showing stars and worlds beyond imagining. They invited him to leave his people and join them among the stars. But the king shook his head. He placed his hand on the golden throne and looked toward his city. He chose to stay. He chose to rule his people until his final breath, even though he had been offered eternal life. The vision faded, leaving the three in silence. Only the hum of the throne remained. Emil felt his heart swell. He refused them. He stayed with his people. That was his choice. Tolan's face was hard. He was wise. The throne was not meant for men to take lightly. Do you not see? It is a burden, not a gift. But Emil could not look away. He felt the throne pulling at him, not with force, but with quiet promise. He thought of his grandmother's carving, of the glyphs he had studied for years, and of the whisper he had thought he heard in the temple. He believed the throne was calling him. Nira placed a hand on his arm. "Emil, we must be careful. This is not just history. This is living power. If you touch it, something may change forever." Emil nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on the throne. He stepped closer again, his hand hovering above the golden armrest. As he did, the humming grew stronger, the black stone eyes of the jaguar glowing faintly. The temple seemed to lean in around them, the walls alive with unseen energy. Emil's chest rose and fell quickly. For a moment he thought he heard a deep voice within the hum, not frightening but solemn. "The choice remains." He froze. The words were not spoken by Nira or Tolan. They came from the air itself, carried by the throne. Tolan gripped his blade tighter, though he knew it was useless. Nira's face grew pale, her eyes wide with fear and awe. Emil lowered his hand, not yet ready to touch. The weight of the moment pressed on him. This throne was more than gold, more than legend. It was a bridge between worlds, a test given across time. He stepped back, breathing hard. The Jaguar king chose to stay. But now the throne waits again. It waits for another choice. The three stood in silence, the glow of the throne bathing them in golden light. They were locked inside the temple, surrounded by echoes of the past and bound by a secret that few living souls had ever known. The golden throne of the Jaguar king had been revealed. And with it came a question that would decide not just their path, but perhaps the future of all humankind. The golden throne glowed softly in the vast chamber, filling the air with a warm light that flickered across the walls. Emil stood before it, his hand resting against his chest where the small jaguar carving lay hidden in his pocket. His heart pounded like a drum. The voice he had heard still echoed inside him. The choice remains. It was not loud, yet it carried more weight than any sound he had ever heard in his life. Nira and Tolan stood behind him, silent. Each of them felt the same heavy air, though neither had heard the words as clearly as Emil. Emil looked back at them, his face pale but steady. This is not only a throne, it is a trial. The Jaguar King chose to stay with his people, but now the throne waits for someone else. It waits for me. Nira shook her head quickly. You cannot know that. Perhaps it only shows itself to anyone who finds it. Emil, you must not rush. This power may demand more than you can give. Tolan's eyes were sharp. The Skywalkers gave the throne, but it was never meant for human hands. Even the king knew this. That is why he refused their offer. He was wise, but Emil could not shake the pull inside him, since the first time he had read the glyphs, since he had touched the stone wall behind the waterfall. He had felt this call. It was not greed that drove him. It was not the desire to rule. It was a feeling that he was part of something much older, something that stretched beyond the jungle and beyond the stars. He turned back toward the throne. Its jaguar eyes glowed faintly as though watching him. Slowly, carefully, he climbed the last steps and stood directly before it. The hum of the chamber deepened. The light from the throne grew brighter. Emil raised his hand again, and this time he touched the golden armrest. At once the world shifted. The chamber, the pillars, the walls, all faded like mist in the sun. Emil found himself standing in a vast space filled with light. Stars shone all around him, endless and bright. The air was still yet alive. Before him appeared a figure dressed in the feathers and gold of the Mayan kings. His face was strong, his eyes deep and filled with sorrow and pride. Emil knew at once who he was. The Jaguar King, Emil whispered. The king spoke, his voice calm and steady. I was offered life among the stars, but I chose my people. I chose to remain until my body grew weak and my breath was gone. That was my path. But the throne was not buried with me. It was left to wait for another. For you? Emil's knees trembled, but he stood tall. Why me? I am no king, no ruler. I am only a seeker of knowledge. The king's eyes softened. That is why the throne calls to you. Power is not for those who hunger for it. It is for those who do not seek it. Tell me, Emil, if you are given the strength to lead, what will you choose? Will you rise above others or will you serve them? The stars around them shifted. Visions filled the air. Emil saw images of himself seated on the golden throne, crowds bowing before him. He saw himself ruling with endless power, feared by all. The vision tempted him, whispering of glory. He closed his eyes and shook his head. No, I do not wish for that. The vision changed. Now he saw himself sharing the throne's wisdom with the world, guiding people not as a ruler but as a teacher. He saw cities built with unity, people living in peace, learning from the stars. His chest ached as he spoke. If the throne is mine, then I choose not to rule. I choose to serve. I choose to share its wisdom with all. The Jaguar King stepped closer, his form glowing brighter. Your heart speaks truth. This was the trial given to me, and it is now given to you. Where I chose to remain, you may choose to rise. The Skywalkers wait, but so does your world. Decide, Emil. The throne cannot remain silent forever. Emil felt the weight of the choice pressing down on him. He thought of Nira and Tolan waiting in the chamber. He thought of his village, of his grandmother's stories, of the children who grew up hearing the legend of the Jaguar King. Slowly, he placed his hand over his heart. I will not abandon my people. Like you, I will stay. But I will not let this throne sleep. I will awaken its wisdom and share it with humanity. Not for my name, but for all. The Jaguar King smiled faintly, and then his form dissolved into the stars. The visions faded. The hum softened. Emil gasped and found himself once again seated on the golden throne in the temple chamber. His body trembled, sweat running down his face. Nira and Tolan stared at him, their eyes wide. Nira's voice shook. What happened? Emil, what did you see? Emil stood slowly, his hand still pressed against the jaguar carving in his pocket. I spoke with the Jaguar King. He showed me the choice he once made, and now I have made mine. The throne glowed warmly, its jaguar eyes shining brighter than before. The test was not finished, but the path had begun. The future of the Jaguar King's throne was now in Emil's hands. The throne chamber was silent, yet the air pulsed as if the walls themselves were breathing. Emil stood tall, his hand still resting on the jaguar carving in his pocket. The golden throne behind him glowed like a living sun, its light spreading into every corner. Nira and Tolan were frozen in awe. They had seen Emil vanish for a heartbeat, his body rigid as stone, then return with a strange calm in his eyes. Something about him had changed, and they could feel it. Emil's voice was steady. The Jaguar King spoke to me. His choice was to remain with his people, but he left the throne for another. Now the throne waits for me, yet the test is not complete. As if answering his words, the golden throne rumbled. A low hum spread through the ground, and the pillars around them lit up with streams of blue fire. The carvings on the walls began to move, shifting like water. Stars appeared on the stone, glowing as if the whole jungle sky had been pulled into the temple. The chamber seemed to open wider. The ceiling above faded into darkness filled with constellations. Emil, Nira, and Tolan were no longer in stone walls, but beneath an endless sky. Tolan gripped his staff tightly. This is no trick. This is the throne's true power. Emil stepped forward. It is the trial of the stars. I must face it. Nira caught his arm. Emil, you have already risked too much. What if it takes you away? What if you never return? Emil smiled faintly. If I do not face it, then the throne will sleep again. The choice must be complete. The stars above shifted, forming the shape of a great jaguar across the sky. Its eyes gleamed and its tail stretched across the heavens. The jaguar opened its mouth, and from it poured a path of light that reached down to the throne. Emil walked onto the path. His body rose into the air, carried upward as if by invisible hands. Nira and Tolan called his name, but their voices grew faint as the stars swallowed him. Emil landed on a plain of shining stone surrounded by endless space. Stars hung close, pulsing with light, and in their glow stood 3 figures. They were tall, their forms cloaked in silver. Their faces were hidden, but their presence filled the air with power. One of them spoke, the voice neither loud nor soft, but clear as running water. You are the seeker chosen by the throne. The Jaguar King refused us once, but his spirit guided you here. Now you must answer what he would not. Emil bowed his head. I am ready. The second figure raised a hand, and the stars formed images in the air. Emil saw worlds beyond Earth filled with towers of crystal and rivers of light. He saw ships that crossed galaxies in moments, carrying knowledge beyond imagination. This can be yours, the figure said. Take the throne, and you will lead humanity into the stars. You will guide them as king of both earth and sky. Emil's chest tightened. The vision was beautiful. His people could travel freely, their lives full of wonder. Yet he remembered the Jaguar King's words. Power was not for those who sought it. The third figure stepped forward, and the vision shifted. Emil now saw a quiet village, children playing in the fields, elders telling stories by the fire. The people were simple yet peaceful. Or, the figure said, you may refuse. Remain as you are. Humanity will find its own way slowly with no throne to guide them. Emil stood between the 2 visions, his heart torn. One path offered greatness, the other offered patience. Then he heard a faint whisper. It was the Jaguar King's voice again, not commanding, but gentle. The throne is not a crown. It is a mirror. It shows who you are. Emil breathed deeply. He thought of his grandmother telling him the story of the Jaguar King. He thought of Nira and Tolan, who had stood with him even when the journey grew dangerous. He thought of the children who would grow up in the villages, dreaming of the sky. At last he spoke. I will not rule as a king. I will not take this power to place myself above others, but neither will I leave it sleeping. I will awaken the throne, and I will share its wisdom with all people. Let the throne be not a seat of one ruler, but a bridge for everyone. The stars pulsed brighter, and the figures lowered their heads. The first spoke again. Your choice is made. The throne accepts you. Humanity will walk the path of the stars, not under one king, but together. Light rushed around Emil, lifting him higher. The star jaguar roared, its voice shaking the heavens. Then the visions faded, and he was back in the throne chamber. Emil fell to his knees, his breath heavy. The throne's glow dimmed, then steadied, no longer as a lure, but as a quiet flame. Nira and Tolan rushed to his side. Nira's eyes were wide. Emil, what did you see? He placed his hand on the throne. I saw what could be, and I made the choice. The throne will not rest as a crown. It will live as a guide. The chamber settled into silence again, but the air carried a sense of change. Something had awakened, and the world beyond the jungle would soon feel it. The jungle was quiet as Emil, Nira, and Tolan left the hidden chamber of the Golden Throne. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, painting the forest floor in patterns of gold and green. Every step they took felt heavier than before, but in a good way. They carried more than supplies or tools. They carried knowledge and a purpose that would change their world. Emil walked first, the jaguar carving still clutched in his hand. He felt the warmth of the throne within him, not as power to command others, but as guidance and wisdom. Nira and Tolan walked beside him, their eyes scanning the jungle but also reflecting trust and hope. "This temple will always be here," Tolan said quietly, "protected by the forest, guarded by the spirits of the past. But what you carry now, Emil, cannot stay locked away." Emil nodded. "I know the throne is not mine to keep. It is for everyone who seeks wisdom, for all who wish to learn. I will not rule, but I will teach." Nira smiled, a mixture of pride and relief in her eyes. "Then we have a path to follow. This is only the beginning. The world must hear the story and they must understand it." They traveled for days, moving carefully through rivers and thick trees, retracing their steps out of the jungle. Every night Emil spoke to Nira and Tolan about what he had seen. He described the trial of the stars, the visions of other worlds, and the choice he had made. The more he spoke, the more the others understood the depth of what had happened. When they finally returned to the edge of the village, the sun was rising. The golden light touched the fields and the river, and birds sang as if celebrating their return. Villagers noticed them and came forward, curious about their journey and their long absence. Emil stepped forward, holding the jaguar carving high. "I have seen the throne of the Jaguar King," he said. "I have spoken with the spirits who guarded it, and I have made a choice. The throne is not for one ruler. It is a guide for all people. It is a bridge between the knowledge of the past and the future we can create together." The villagers listened wide-eyed, some in disbelief, others in awe. Nira shared what she had recorded in her notebook: the glyphs, the carvings, the visions, and the lessons of the Jaguar King. Tolan explained the ways of the forest and the importance of respect for the temple and its secrets. The elders nodded slowly. "The stories we told were true," one said. "The throne waited, and now it has chosen someone who will serve, not rule. This is the honor of your heart, Emil." Emil smiled, feeling the weight of responsibility. He did not feel like a king, but he felt stronger in a different way. The wisdom he had received was a light he could share, a path he could guide others along. In the days that followed, he began teaching the villagers what he had learned. He spoke of respect for the past, courage to face the unknown, and humility when offered power. He told children about the Jaguar King and the Skywalkers, not as stories of magic, but as lessons of choice and honor. Word began to spread beyond the village. People traveled to learn from Emil, seeking guidance not for wealth or status, but to understand themselves and the world around them. The jungle and the temple remained hidden, but its influence reached far, carried in the lessons of those who listened. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky glowed with red and gold, Emil returned to the river where his journey had begun. He held the jaguar carving up to the light. The temple behind the waterfall remained hidden, silent and glowing faintly in his memory. He whispered, "Thank you, Jaguar King. I will honor your choice and keep your wisdom alive." Nira and Tolan stood beside him, watching the water flow. Tolan spoke softly. "The throne will always wait for another, but you have shown what it means to serve. That is the true power." Emil nodded. "And now the people will learn, step by step. The stars are not only above us. They are within us in the choices we make and the wisdom we share." The three friends walked back toward the village, their shadows long in the evening light. Behind them the jungle whispered, carrying the secrets of the past and the promise of the future. The Golden Throne had chosen well. Its legacy would live not as a crown of power, but as a light for humanity to follow. In the heart of the jungle, the temple remained, and the jaguar's eyes still glowed in the dark. But the greatest power of all was now awake in the world, the choice to use knowledge for the good of all. Emil smiled, feeling the warmth of the Golden Throne in his heart. The Jaguar King's spirit had not left him. It had awakened humanity's courage, humility, and hope. And in that moment he knew the future belonged to those who chose to serve, not to rule.